Hi, everyone. My name is Barry Sager. I'm a U.S. Bank Goals Coach. Thank you for joining us and going through our webinar here today. Today, we're going to cover your path to financial wellness. It begins with smart financial habits. And on the next slide here, we'll go through some introductions and not only introduce myself a little bit further, but also my fellow panelists here today. So as mentioned, I'm a goals coach here with US Bank. I'm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I've been with US Bank for a little less than a year, and I have a master's of science degree in education to go along with my bachelor's degree. But my professional background and work background is more in college and career counseling. And as part of my role and experience, I really enjoy being an accountability partner for clients. Really working towards long-term goals, including things like buying a home and saving for something big, including things like retirement and purchases that come along with life, those types of things. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and send it over to my colleague, John. John, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks, Barry. My name is John Hirano. I'm also a goals coach with US Bank. I'm located here in the city in Las Vegas. Prior to becoming a goals coach, I've spent time in a lot of different areas, a little bit of time as an executive director for a nonprofit, and also spent a bunch of time in academia. I actually have a doctorate in electrical engineering, and I spent some time at the college level being a professor and teaching. And one of the things that I enjoy most about kind of my entire career path at this point is the opportunity to help people realize what is possible in their lives, even when they don't see what's possible. Jason, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, John. Hi, I'm Jason Chilton, and I've been with US Bank for 13 years now, the last 5 of which I've spent right here at our UNLV branch. Now, I really think this is the best branch we have. Now, I may be a little biased since this is the university I studied finance at, but the real reason it's my favorite branch is I enjoy working with the students here on campus to help work them toward achieving financial wellness. I look forward to working for you all today and seeing you all in the future. Now, on the next slide, John will get us started on our presentation.
Thanks, Jason. So before we start diving into what we talked about is habits, I want to start talking about goals. I'm sure we've all set goals in the past, maybe big life goals, maybe some things a little bit smaller. But how much thought have we put into our goals? You know, do we just think, well, like, hey, I want to be more fit this year, or do I just want to be more financially secure? What I really want you guys to start thinking about is how do we get a little bit deeper? And as part of our coaching program, what we do is we start with what we call our goals discovery. This is really an opportunity to dive into goals with our clients and really talk about and answer these 3 questions that you guys see in front of you. So we always start with the why. So why does this goal matter to you? And I don't just mean in the sense that like, I just want to achieve this thing, but really, why is it important to you? Do you want to buy a house because you want a home, or is it because you want a sense of security, or maybe you've never had a home of your own and you're like, hey, for me and my kids going forward, it's something that is deeply important to me going forward. That's what's really key to setting that stage, because when you're attached to your goals emotionally, it makes it so much more powerful to achieving it and really increases the probability of you pursuing it even through the tough times. The second thing here is, when do you want to achieve it? Setting a deadline, having that hard point of being like, hey, I'm going to get this done in 6 months, in a year. Maybe it's a big goal and it's going to take a few years, but knowing when that deadline is really helps to start planning and also part of the motivation. Part of our coaching program, what we often do is taking those dates and the several goals that you have and then laying out in a timeline. The timeline does a few things for us. 1, it kind of gives us that big picture of what's going on. But 2, it also then allows us to see like, hey, some of these things overlap. Maybe I got to work on these 2 goals at the same time to achieve them. And in some cases, they're dependent on each other. Maybe you need to reduce your debt before purchasing a house, but you want to get that house in the next 2 years. So maybe we need to put a bigger importance on expeditiously, bringing down your debt and preparing for that goal that's coming up in the future. Sometimes with our clients, when they see this timeline, it's a little overwhelming, but it's okay. Things can change, things can adjust. We can move things around. We all understand that life happens at the end of the day. And the last one you see here is, how much will it cost? When it comes to financial goals, there's often a number that goes to it. For example, how much do you want to put for that down payment? But sometimes when the how can also mean it's a quantifiable goal. Maybe you want to be a little bit healthier this year. Maybe it's about losing that extra 10 pounds. Having a number that is quantifiable allows us to kind of measure and track where you are with those goals. So as we go through it, you want to have someone that comes with you and really is able to help you get to that. So as goals coaches, what we do is we kind of take the goals that you have in your life and then walk through the same process for each one of those goals. Now that we talked about goals at a big level, Barry, will you explain a little bit about what are habits?
Yeah, thanks, John. And we can go ahead and move over to the next slide here. And I know most of you are watching this in a recorded version, but I'm going to ask this anyways. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to raise your hand if you brushed your teeth today. And again, I can't see who's necessarily raising their hand. Oh, John brushed his teeth. Good. Jason, maybe not. No. I know I can't see everybody, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that most of you did go ahead and brush your teeth this morning. This is a perfect example of a habit that you probably do without much mental effort. And in fact, you probably have specific cues that tell you if it's time to brush your teeth, like the toothbrush and toothpaste are sitting next to your sink. Maybe you connect it to other activities too, like taking a shower or washing your face, whatever the case might be. And you're probably so good at brushing your teeth that you can think about other things while you're doing it. And we even have little parts of technology too that make the process enjoyable for a lot of us too, like tasty toothpaste or a nifty electronic toothbrush. But overall, I'm sure everybody's doing great as far as that category is concerned. Now, with that being said, what if saving money for your future was this simple and this easy? What if your budget was as predictable and easy to follow as your brushing routine would be? That's what we want to cover as part of this webinar. We want to go ahead and share some tips around creating and maintaining smart financial habits. I'm going to go ahead and send it back to John here too. Together, the both of us, we're going to go ahead and just discuss further the right approach as far as goals and what that looks like in getting started here. So we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. And as we talk about these habits and goals, it doesn't matter if you're a seasoned business owner or if you're in college, like I assume most of you are. Your time is your most precious commodity. That being said, identifying a timetable and being spot on with the completion date is not as valuable as identifying, and most importantly, envisioning yourself achieving your goals. The timeline itself fuels the empowerment of achieving the goal and supports one accountability along the way. Next, as you're looking at all the moving parts of your finances to guide you in the best in the best tactile approach to paying down debt while staying aligned with a living and breathing document in a budget, and then really determining your comfort level with risk too. How about you, John? What do you think?
I think risk is such an important thing, right? It's understanding your risk, but also what's important is that if you do have a partner, right, there's someone that you're doing life with, is that understanding your risk. And so that always starts with some clear lines of communication, right? Being able to really talk about where you both are. Are you on the same page going forward? Not just in terms of risk, but the entire goals process. And the last thing here is take advantage of resources that are available for you, right? Some of those things might be a family member, friends, community organizations, or even your on-campus branch partner, like Jason, or even one of the coaches here. What we love to do most is being a partner with you along that journey and really just helping you to achieve what's important to you. Now let's dive into more financially centric portion of our conversation. Jason, will you cover a little bit about smart financial habits?
Thank you, John. I would love to. Now, there are many ways to build smart habits. Today, we're going to talk about just a few ways to get started. Now, we'll discuss them briefly now and go into more detail a bit later in our presentation today. The first one will be saving for a rainy day. Now, what you want to do is aim for 3 to 9 months worth of total expenses based on your current circumstances. Next, you want to manage your budget. Now, a budget is an ongoing account of your household income and expenses. If you can make a budget a habit, you'll have a lot more control over your money. Use our budgeting calculator to learn where you have room to save. And then thirdly, access your credit. Get in the habit of checking your credit score regularly. That could be 2 to 4 times a year. Now, US Bank customers can do this for free at usbank.com/free credit score. You can also get a free full report from the 3 credit bureaus once a year. Try this tip. Check your credit in the app every time you replace your toothbrush. You can learn more at usbank.com/smart-habits, or you can scan the QR code with your phone. And most importantly, remember to celebrate your small successes. Now, on the next slide, we'll cover how to develop saving habits. Barry, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Jason. And if you find yourself being more inclined to be a spender, you don't need to fret, or there's no really reason to despair. We have some tips to help your brain build better savings habits along the way here, starting with friction. And friction is really considered, it's a scientific term for a small amount of effort that makes you less likely to do something. Now, you can reduce friction by making it easier to save, and you can add friction by slowing down your spending. And one way to add friction is to remove those shops or those saved credit cards from your phone, just to make that process a little more difficult along the way. Next, accountability is another useful technique. And when you're feeling highly motivated, like hopefully right now, you can go ahead and schedule your future self for activities like meeting with a goals coach, or maybe with a financial advisor or planner. Once that meeting is on the calendar and you have another person involved with your goals, you're more likely to follow through. And you can enlist an accountability partner, whether that's a friend or a family member, just really, anybody who's important in your life, who will really help keep you honest as you work towards your goals. Next, it's also really important to stay emotionally connected to your goal. For example, if you're saving for a new home because you want your kid to grow up in that home, keep a photo of your child in your wallet and place that in front of your credit card as an example. If your goal feels so big that you can't quite imagine getting there, break it into smaller chunks or milestones along the way. When you hit one of those milestones, again, make sure to take some time and set some time aside to celebrate that achievement and that accomplishment. That feeling will keep you motivated and keep you moving forward. How about you, John? What do you think?
I really agree with that last piece a lot about staying emotionally connected, right? It's so important getting and pushing through kind of the hard times that we all kind of face as we go through life. But I do want to kind of double back on that friction point. I think that's also a great one. In many ways, we can leverage friction in a couple of different ways, especially when we talk about savings. We can reduce friction on the front end in terms of getting money into a savings account. Many banks, including US Bank, have a way of either sending money through their mobile app, setting up a automatic deposit or automatic transfer, which really make things just kind of happen without you thinking about it. On the flip side, it's making it a little bit harder to move that money back, right? Sometimes it's easy to move it back and forth. What you want to do is maybe find ways, and different institutions have means of making it a little bit harder to move that money back into the checking account, right? When it's there, it might take 2 or 3 extra steps to do that. And when you increase the friction coming back into that checking, you're less likely to kind of spend it. Also, as we do, we want to make sure that, at the end of the day, these things become better over time. Maybe the first couple months you feel it, but a lot of times when we talk to customers, after a few months, you're like, oh, those whether it's $10, $100, it becomes less noticeable as you kind of work through your balance. And then over time, those small savings really do add up and really can become a big savings down the line. But now that we've kind of talked about these habits, hey, Jason, would you want to talk a little bit more about a rainy day fund and what it is?
Thank you, John. I would love to. So on our next slide here, we're going to go ahead and discuss one of the most foundational goals that everyone should be saving for, which is the rainy day fund or emergency fund. Now, there's a lot of baggage that comes with the word emergency. And you're not just saving for a disaster emergency. Life's expensive, and unexpected expenses come in all shapes and sizes. Think car repairs, doctor bills, broken appliances. Sometimes it's good stuff too. Maybe your kid made the basketball team and you need $100 to pay for uniforms and registration fees. Or maybe you just got invited to your friend's wedding. With COVID, it's probably on Zoom these days. And you want to send them a nice gift. So you may not know exactly what you're going to need it for, but you definitely want to have that money to be there when you do need it. Now, a regular savings account is a great choice for this goal because it's so flexible and easy to access your money when you need it. How much to keep in this account will depend on your financial situation. A common rule of thumb is to do 3 to 9 months of expenses, but even $1,000 can make a meaningful difference in your ability to weather the unexpected without going into debt. Now, many people feel guilty about using the money in their rainy day fund. They think it should only be used for serious emergencies or very rare, once in a decade type events. But that's not the case. If you don't have enough money in your checking account to cover a payment, the rainy day fund should be the first resort, not your last resort. Also, some people work jobs where they only get paid once per month or sometimes even less frequently than that. But even though most of their bills are still showing up on a monthly basis. So people in that situation can use a rainy day fund to help smooth out their cash flow. In other words, save more during times when you have more cash inflows than outflows, and then dip into your rainy day savings fund during times when you have more cash outflows than inflows. As a general rule, as long as you're being thoughtful and intentional about how you're using your rainy day fund, and you stay disciplined about adding to the fund frequently, you can use the funds confidently without feeling guilty or ashamed. Now, on the next slide, I'll cover where you should keep your rainy day fund at. Now, regardless of your income or life stage, everyone has a savings need. It doesn't matter if you're older or younger, very wealthy, or just starting out in life. Everybody needs to save money. The money you save should be in a safe and secure place. Now, while this piggy bank is a very cute illustration, it's not actually a very smart place to be putting your money. The savings account is designed for money that you want to set aside, but also be able to access easily. We can save for many things. It could be a vacation, a wedding, or a many number of events. But as mentioned earlier, the most important part of savings is establishing what we're calling that rainy day fund. I'm bringing this up again because this is a fund serves as a very important function. You add money to it whenever you're able to save, and you take out money to the fund when you have payments that can't be covered with the funds in your checking accounts. Now, don't make it too easy to access your rainy day funds. You don't want to spend this money without realizing it. So keep it separate from the account that you use to pay your bills. That's why it's very important to have both a checking and a savings account. You can set a nickname on your savings account and call it a rainy day fund or whatever it is that works for you. But the most important thing is that the fund is there. And if you don't have a rainy day fund set up yet, don't feel bad. The great thing is that it's never too late to start saving. And as you'll find out, making even small changes in how you save can have a big impact over time. And the best part is that at US Bank and many others banks, we offer savings tools that are super easy to use and help you continue to save consistently going forward. Now, on the next slide, John and Barry will bust some of the myths about saving and debt.
Thanks, Jason. So the first myth that we're going to be talking about is the one I think a lot of times we hear, right, when you're trying to pay down debt is, I can't save until my debt is paid off. And for some people, this is a mindset or something that they've been taught, but really, at the end of the day, debt is expensive. It can even be burdensome. And what we want to do is knowing that, hey, the interest that you pay on debt always seems to be higher than that you're keeping in a savings account, right? And so, but what we want to address is the fact that, like, hey, like the rainy day savings, we want to be able to kind of get ahead of the curve a little bit, right? So when those things do come up, those unexpected expenses, like let's not call them emergencies, those unexpected expenses, like Jason was talking about, whether it's a wedding or something more on the negative side, we want to be able to pay those things off with cash, right? And not have to go and accrue any other additional debt along the way. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to get what's called a debt cycle where we're just accruing and adding to that debt. You want to continue paying it down and reducing that overall debt you have. And so having this emergency fund really allows you to kind of get in front of things and not add to the bucket that you already might feel is a little overwhelming. Barry, what happens now with those that tell you that they can't afford to save?
Yeah, thanks, John. For those who feel that they don't have enough money to save, you're definitely not alone. Most Americans are really living from paycheck to paycheck, and it can be overwhelming to even imagine setting aside money when you're so tight on cash. However, here's the good news: you can start small and still have a real impact as far as your savings are concerned. Small choices will add up over time. That's important to remember. And saving 1 penny or a dime maybe doesn't feel like a whole lot in the moment, but over time, those pennies and dimes can add up to $50 or to $100 and eventually thousands of dollars. So, start small and really get in that good habit. And in doing so, you can start by printing your bank statement and looking at what you've been spending money on over the last few months. See if you can find a few areas that you can cut back on and maybe redirect that money to your rainy day or your emergency fund as well. And with that being said, I mean, don't make it complicated on yourself. You really start with the easy stuff, like expenses that don't add a lot of value in your life. Like maybe it's having multiple subscriptions to streaming networks, similar to myself. I need to, and I would recommend this as well. It's just really sitting down and asking yourself, which one do I barely use? When you unsubscribe, you might have some extra cash that can really flow into your savings at that point, and that money can start to add up as well. Now, with that, I'm not telling you to cut every fun thing out of your life. That's not necessarily realistic, and it's not always sustainable as well. If Friday night takeout is something your family looks forward to all week, then don't get rid of that right away. Maybe you can look at some lower cost options to begin with and save some money as far as that's concerned. But really focus on those things you can cut out without too much distress in your life. And if you've gone through everything and all of it feels essential to you, then maybe you can start thinking about some ways that you can boost your income as well. And I know the job market and searching for a job can be tough, but maybe you can find some extra ways to earn money, whether it's like delivering food or groceries as an example. Or maybe you can sell items that you have laying around the house too. I know in the past I've used apps like OfferUp and even like social media marketplaces, which make it super easy to get rid of stuff that you don't necessarily need, and that could include sports equipment or household items or even clothes. You'll look for some of those easy ways that you can move stuff out of your house and then direct those funds into your savings. John, do you want to go ahead and take the last hint here as well?
Yeah, what this last myth here is that I know it's something we have brought up, that you need to have 3 to 6 months of expenses saved, right? And we are talking about expenses and not income, so we're gonna have to distinguish that a little bit later. But you know what? It is. A lot of experts say it's 3 to 6 months, and the reason for this is because, say something happens where you lose your job or you're not able to work. Usually this is about the amount of time that the average American takes to, or average person takes to find a new job. And so, it's a great rule of thumb, but to be honest, it can be also quite a big number, right? And that number can be overwhelming and in itself slightly counterproductive, right? Because we can get to that place where like, oh, that's so much money, why do I even want to start, right? It seems too out of control. And it's great if you're in a place where you are financially secure and your debt is reduced and managed, and your retirement fund is being contributed to. And so maybe, you're in that place where, yeah, I can do that. But for, many people, that's not the case. In fact, for about 40% of American households, even being able to pay a $400 emergency without borrowing money or selling something isn't possible. So, for many people, this 3 to 6 months seem very much out there and a little bit too big. But let's kind of back up for a second. Let's forget about the numbers and let's just start with the lowest common denominator here, $400. Maybe you tell yourself, yeah, I can do 400. Or maybe you think in the next couple months, I can do $400. Let's start with that. Because once you have that $400 in that rainy day savings fund, you are already ahead of, we could say, 40% of the people around you. But then from there, then we can start raising the ante a little bit. So now maybe we're looking at that $1,000. And then from there, we just keep growing. This kind of goes back to some of the principles we had talked about goal setting, where we build up. We start with small goals and we just keep building upon them. And if that number doesn't seem quite tangible enough for you, another way to think about what number do I need is maybe you can just start with a mortgage or your rent, right? It's some of those really important things that you hold on to, and you can say, okay, I want to save 2 months worth of rent or 2 months of my mortgage payment. That way, at the end of the day, if something happens, at least you have a roof over your head. Now that we've broken down some of the myths, Jason, can you share about some ways to, automate savings?
Thank you, John. I would love to. Now, most folks have different savings tools that can help automate your savings so that you can establish good saving habits without even thinking about it. Today, we'll talk about 2 tools that US Bank offers. Now, the first one is automatic transfers. You can set up an automatic recurring transfer to move money from your checking account to your savings account on a regular basis. One good way to use it is to set an amount to be transferred on each payday. So for example, if you get paid every other Friday and you can consistently save $50 of your paycheck, you can use the automatic transfer feature in either usbank.com or a mobile app to set up the recurring transfer. It's a great way to save large chunks of money. And if for some reason you don't have enough money in your checking account to make the transfer, then it won't even happen. So you never have to worry about an automatic transfer taking your balance into the negative. A second tool we have is purchase transfers. This is a really useful feature that lets you save money every time you use your debit card or credit card. Just log into your account at usbank.com and set any amount between 25 cents and $5. And every time you make a debit card or credit card transaction, that amount will get transferred from your checking account to your savings account. It's a great way to stay disciplined about savings because every time you spend, you also save. So purchase transfers help you save smaller amounts, but more frequently, while automatic transfers help you help larger amounts, but less frequently. And when you use these two features together, your savings will start building very quickly. Now, on the next slide, John will share the definition of budgeting for us.
So here's that scary term, what is a budget? So according to dictionary.com, a budget is an estimate, often itemized, of expected income and expenses for a given period of the future. 2, an itemized allotment of funds or time for a given period. Or 3, a plan of operations based on such an estimate. Sounds simple, right? You know, and many of us can kind of do this. I think some of us, we just do it in our heads. We're like, I know how much I'm getting paid this month. I get paid every 2 weeks. And generally, this is what I spend money on. But how many of us actually go and write this down and have a physical budget? You know, it sometimes that's a little bit harder said than done. And, you know, it's a great practice. And the reason for that, it really allows us to really understand what's coming in and then what's going out at the end of the day, and then planning accordingly. And so as you kind of go through that practice, you know, it can get hard, but a key to doing it well and consistently is staying positive. Barry, do you want to share a little bit about staying positive with your budget?
Yeah, thanks, John. And we'll go ahead and share a quote here from Rosette Wamambe, who she states, budgeting is not just for people who do not have enough money. It is for everyone who wants to ensure that their money is enough. So really powerful words there. It's important to realize that saving money is a means to an end and not an end in itself. So as you're creating your budget, you know, really focus not on the negatives, but on your smallest wins along the way. And now I'll go ahead and kick it back to Jason here just to give us some tips on how to go ahead and button up our budget along the way.
Thank you so much, Barry and John. So on the next slide here, we will look at a basic plan for our budget. So now I'm probably not the first person to tell you that it's important to have a budget. When you have a good handle on your cash flow and your expenses, you may know how much you can afford to save. And you can look thoughtfully at places you might be able to save a little more and work towards your goals. For some people, having a budget is like wrapping up in a warm, fuzzy security blanket. They feel comfortable knowing exactly where and when and how they'll be spending their money. However, for others, budget is basically a 4-letter word, or is it the budget makes you say 4-letter words? Either way, why is budgeting so polarizing? Now, because I'm not a trained or licensed therapist, I can't give it a clinical reason on why people feel the way they do, but I'll share what I've learned and observed over the years. Ready? People would rather spend their money enjoying life than paying bills. It's really that simple. Unfortunately, banks, car dealerships, and other lenders aren't particularly interested in what we'd rather do, and they expect us to pay our bills before we go out and have fun. Here we can see an example of how to form a budget. So the very first thing we want to do is start out about discussing someone's income. We want to look at someone's net income. That's how much they actually take home after deductions like taxes and insurance. We then focus on necessities and break down the budget into categories. So by setting up categories, it allows us to comb through different expenses and see where we could possibly save money and when we're at the end of our budget. We'd like to use a budgeting worksheet to help our clients get started with their budget. Next, we want to make sure we set aside money for our rainy day savings fund we discussed earlier. And then after that, it's time to tally up. Now, after we tally, what we do is we're going to go ahead and take our income and deduct out both our monthly expenses and the amount we plan to save for our rainy day fund. And this is where we find out if we need to make any adjustments to our budget. Now, in our next slide, Barry and John will discuss some common budgeting mistakes.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And one of the first mistakes we'll often see is that oftentimes, like, a budget can include the category bills. And without defining those bills and the proper amount of money isn't necessarily allocated. So we end up falling short in that category. But consider the bills category utilities. Usually utilities are more of like a catch-all for your power, your water, sewer, trash, cable, even your streaming services that we had mentioned earlier. And we'll go ahead and allocate a specific amount of money to each month to pay those utilities. And while we pay set amounts for each month for some of those utilities, some do end up fluctuating, and we don't plan for that, leaving us short in that category. So with that being said, the best way to avoid overgeneralizing is to choose a budget and to choose the categories within that budget that are personally, more personally meaningful to you. If you don't have pets or kids, for an example, don't clutter up your budget with those categories. If you spend a lot of supplies on your pottery hobby, as an example, or maybe you have a side hustle that involves some spending as well, then really that's a category that you should be adding to your budget. The best budget overall is one that makes sense to you and is easy to use, so that even the automatic part of your brain knows which category a particular expense will fall into. Now, at US Bank, we do offer a budget worksheet that you can access, and that's through usbank.com/financialiq. And for anybody who's looking for a starting point, that's a great place to begin. I know personally I've customized my own budget to add my own categories. A lot of it's around my own kids, like their hobbies and educational expenses. And so if you're looking for that starting point or launching point, definitely check that site out. John, I'll send it over to you. What are some unrealistic targets that we oftentimes see?
I think unrealistic targets, it's one of those tricky ones, right? It's, maybe your unrealistic target is only spending $100 on restaurants or eating out for that month, right? As we kind of narrow things down. But you're also a family of 5. And so eating out in a whole month and not spending more than $100, even going to McDonald's, that might be challenging. But really understanding what is your real budget look like really starts with looking at the past, right? It's looking at what did you actually spend last month on when you ate out and ate at restaurants. We don't want to set those targets too low when it comes to in terms of minimizing spending, but we also don't want to set it too high when it turns of like trying to save for something big. We talked about goals like purchasing a house, and maybe you're thinking like, hey, I want to save 20% of my down payment, and we're talking about numbers that are tens of thousands of dollars or even more for some. But what you want to do is break that down. Let's make it a little bit smaller, a little bit more easier to digest, and then that way you can be like, okay, this is what I actually can put aside for this particular goal or this particular savings in the long term. But it's always good to go back, see what last month looked like, and then compare. And then that's how you adjust month over month to make sure that those targets stay realistic, both within what's going on in your own personal lives and what's happening around you. The last thing here that Barry, I want to share about some budget creep. What is that?
Yeah, and I mean, generally when we're thinking about savings, really one of the big overarching themes or keys is to stay disciplined. And so start by setting your goals, then figure out which tools will be most helpful to you along the way. If it's going back to what Jason mentioned with like automatic transfers, purchase transfers, there's a ton of tools out there. Once you have that goal set, you can customize the tools that will help you get to that point. And then from there, the discipline piece is executing consistently over time. That last part, though, however, that executing consistently over time, that's a lot harder than it sounds. And one reason is that our lives can change unexpectedly with little warning along the way. And as we've all experienced, with the pandemic here over the last couple of years, that's a perfect example of things just changing that we've all had to learn to adjust to. And so, as part of that, just staying disciplined, we also need to be flexible along the way too. And while being flexible is good, if we don't maintain that optimal balance between staying disciplined and being flexible, then it's easy to start moving away from the behaviors that made us successful in the first place. Really the best way to guard against this is to do a periodic budget tune-up. And it doesn't need to be complicated. In fact, the simpler the better. Just start by asking yourself, what's different now versus a few months ago? Or if my goals have changed, do I need to save more? Maybe I need to save less. Maybe I need to save differently. A good analogy to this is, going to the gym and getting exercise. Doing it regularly is definitely a great goal all by itself, but you probably don't want to stick with the exact same workout for months and months at a time. There will be periods of time where you want to exercise more or maybe less, depending on how you're feeling and how your health needs are changing. And the same is definitely true as far as your savings needs. John, will you go ahead and share some, just differences that we can see between needs and wants?
Absolutely. So on this next slide, we're going to look at needs and wants. And so this is kind of going into what Barry was talking about, overgeneralization, right? This is where we want to start creating a physical list and looking at what are the things that you really need and what are the things that you are really just wants. Needs are the things that make sure you can get from day to day, maintains living, and maintains a good health, both mind, body, and spirit, but also on the wants on the other end are like those things like, hey, maybe I can live without, or hey, they just kind of add a little fun or a little bonus to life. And so when we think about things like needs, this is often things, like your shelter, where you live, food, water, utilities. And even within the utilities, you can probably balance that out a little bit. I know Barry shared about those streaming services. Do you need 5? Maybe 1, just so you have some things to do, but finding that balance on which ones do you really need, which ones do you watch the most often, and which are the ones that want are the nice to have streaming service. But that's all part of this exercise where you actually physically go and write these things down and kind of waver back and forth. There's also no hard line, like I mentioned, between the two. For example, I have a client who feels like self-care is very important to themselves. And so for them, it was making sure that their hair got taken care of, that, for some of my women clients, they want to get their nails done. And that's fine. If that's what makes you happy and allows you to maintain pursuing your goals and maintain keeping a positive outlook and helps with that mental state things, then great, keep it under your needs. And then you can prioritize it as such. But maybe you have to trade some things off under the wants category, then move things back and forth. Often we also suggest adding things like your savings and your debt under that needs category, making sure that they get paid off right away, that they get allocated ahead of time. That way, as your wealth grows, as your income grows, you're still making sure that you're putting something away, and long-term such things as your savings can grow just as well as your financial growth comes with your income and raises and such. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about mindful spending. Hey, Barry, do you mind sharing?
Yeah, thanks, John. And to really start to put mindful spending into practice, I'd go ahead and recommend first by going ahead and going over your bank statements that you have each month. This is something you can do, or you can print them out from your online account, or I know US Bank, for example, our mobile app's a great way to be able to easily access that information. But on those statements now, the great thing with those is that they can give you a breakdown of where your money is being spent. And this is really a clear-cut picture of just how your money is going out of your account and giving you a chance to really do a good job as far as tracking that information. So that's always a great place to start. As we mentioned earlier, disabling one-click buying is a good opportunity to practice mindful spending as well. This will give you some time to think about whether a purchase is necessary or if it's something that maybe you don't have the funds for at the moment as well. So disabling that one-click buying is a good idea to consider. Also, as we discussed earlier, just being mindful about online subscriptions you're signed up for is important. I know this is becoming a common theme here, but if you're like me and you've connected your checking account to a variety of online subscriptions, things like Netflix or Spotify, it's helpful to exercise a regular audit of those every few months. That set it and forget it approach or model of online subscriptions makes it really challenging to be mindful of these particular expenses. So I think it's really wise to do an audit every few months just to see where you're at, and if you're still regularly using these particular services as well, and if you're finding them valuable. I know in some cases you may have signed up for something and forgotten completely about it, and you just don't use it anymore. So obviously you want to make sure that those funds are being directed into a more valuable place like your savings. But each individual subscription, whether it is Netflix, Pandora, Spotify, Hulu, Apple, I know they all seem like a small amount individually, but they definitely add up. And when you total all of those up month to month, it might surprise you a little bit as far as that expense is concerned. So just take some time to do a regular audit as far as that's concerned. Next, and really to the best of your ability, as we've talked about too, really try to plan ahead for unexpected expenses that you might have in your life too, by saving for those ahead of time, as well as just planning ahead for things that you want and that you're saving towards those as well. So maybe it's a vacation or a vehicle or a new home. To the best of your ability, really try to set funds ahead of time aside for those particular expenses. I would also suggest giving yourself money to spend on yourself, which is money not connected to any kind of financial obligations that you might have each month. It's just money for you to spend on a guilt-free basis, almost like an allowance. So I know it might sound a little childish or maybe even a little corny, but it can really do a good job just as far as making sure you're not dipping into funds that you have other plans for. And again, as we've talked about earlier too, and a couple of times throughout the presentation, another helpful idea is just really using a friend, a family member, maybe it's a goals coach or a financial planner, to really help hold you accountable for the goals that you have and that you would like to reach. As an example, as a goal coach, I've worked with clients who have worked through life changes such as being unemployed. And in some cases, individuals have ended up maxing out their credit cards during that period of time just to keep their bills paid. Once they found employment again, they took the time to book a goals coach session, and that's where we were able to go over where they were spending and what they would like to change about their financial goals and what they would like to reach moving forward. So as part of that process, we were able to discuss making meaningful purchases until they were comfortable with where they were at from a savings standpoint. So just some things to keep in mind when it comes to mindful spending. Next, I'm going to send it back over to Jason, who's going to talk about budgeting and the tools we have that can help keep you on track.
Thank you so much, Barry. So we recommend using a budgeting tool to help you stay organized, whether that's an Excel spreadsheet or a budgeting app. Now, these days, we carry our phones with us everywhere we go, so budgeting tools that are quick and easy to access really make a difference. I view these types of tools as a way to keep yourself honest and maybe decrease spending in some areas. But they're also great for celebrating the small wins day to day, showing positive progress towards your goals. Instead of waiting until the end of the month to reveal whether you stayed within your budget, tools on your phone can help you stay on track and maybe come out ahead of where you thought you'd be at the end of the month. To me, budgeting tools and apps make the whole process less intimidating, and staying within your budget becomes just part of your daily or weekly routine. Now, check if your bank has any budgeting capabilities within their apps. US Bank offers great budgeting resources directly in the mobile app, or you can find them at usbank.com/financialiq. US Bank's mobile app is also ideal for this. Our app will automatically identify changes in spending and show month-to-month comparisons of how your spending changed in a variety of different categories. We also have a feature called micro savings, where app will identify additional money that you can afford to save without disrupting your typical spending habits. And regardless of which app or tool you use, it's only going to be effective if you stay committed to achieving your financial goals. To use this exercise analogy, you can have the greatest exercise equipment in the world, but if you don't stay committed to achieving your health and fitness goals, it's probably not going to do much good. So there's some good news though. US Bank doesn't just give you digital tools. We also have people in our branches, in our phone centers, and elsewhere who can help you answer questions and also get the most out of all these tools we offer. Now, John, on the next slide, will you share some resources available on usbank.com? John, I think you're on mute.
Thanks. Sorry about that. That mute button always gets me. What I was saying is that for myself, I do love our mobile app. It's something that I use regularly. But for those that aren't necessarily part of US Bank, we do still have some free resources that are available to you. On our website at usbank.com/financial wellness, you can get our budgeting sheet that we talked about earlier. It does a great job of giving you a starting point, breaking down some of those categories, avoiding some of the pitfalls that we talked about when we started, and really about getting yourself ahead of the curve. Also, we also have a financial wellness assessment that you can take. And it really just kind of gives you perspective on where you're at. It gives you a little bit of that self-reflection tool to know that, okay, am I on track? Am I doing good with my spending? Am I doing good with my savings? Or maybe you're doing great on all of it, and it's just the circumstance that you're in. But at least it'll give you kind of a snapshot of where you are in comparison to where you are today. And as you do it in the future, you can see yourself improving along the way. Jason, now that we've talked about some general financial wellness, do you mind sharing a little bit about credit wellness on the next slide?
Thank you, John. I would love to. And credit's one of my favorite things to discuss, and it's probably one of the biggest questions that I get most often here at our on-campus branch here at UNLV. Now, just like mental and physical wellness, financial wellness is a journey. You start where you are at this moment, and you take steps to learn and grow toward confidence. Many of us get anxious when we think about credit, and that can bring up some tough emotions. If you found yourself standing in a store or at a bank or a car dealership and you hear the words, "Let's check your credit," maybe that gives you a sinking feeling. You're not alone. If credit stresses you out, we're even more glad that you're here with us today. We're going to give you some tools to make it less stressful. Now, credit is complex and can be confusing if you don't know much about it. We'll help take some of that mystery out of it and give you some easy tools for keeping track of your credit score and feeling confident you're on an upward trajectory. Credit wellness isn't about having a perfect credit score or history. Some of the best wisdom comes from bad events, whether they were your own choices or situations beyond your control. The best thing you can do is learn from your past, know yourself and what affects you, and then forgive yourself and move on. On the next slide, I'll cover some credit scores, and then we can impact your financial well-being. Your credit score is part of credit report. What goes into that number is the same information that goes in your credit report. Think of it like grades in school. Your credit report is like the detailed printout of every assignment you have turned in, while the credit score is like finding out that you got a B+. A little bit of credit trivia before we get started. This number is sometimes called the FICO score, referring to Fair Isaac Corporation, the company that developed the original credit score model. So what goes into your score? There are 5 main ingredients. The first one is payment history. Let's face it, if someone has a consistent history of making payments on time, they should probably be perceived as less of a risk than someone with the same exact credit profile who only has intermittent history of on-time payments. Second is outstanding debt. This is the total amount owed, total across all lenders that report to credit bureaus. That could be credit cards, bank loans, car loans, mortgages, etc. Next, we have your utilization. Now, this is a ratio of how much credit you're using compared to how much you have available. So ideally, you want to try to use less than 30% of your credit limit. So let's say, for instance, your credit limit is $1,000. You'd like to use less than $300 on that particular line. Next, we have credit type and history. History again, yep, all else equal, someone with a longer and more diversified credit history is typically seen as a less risky borrower. This fact reinforces the importance of establishing a solid foundation of good credit as early as possible. And then we have recent inquiries. Each time someone authorizes a lender or business to make an official inquiry of his or her credit in connection with seeking credit, score typically drops a little bit. It's important to apply for credit in moderation. And there are some essentials to know when you're working on building credit wellness, and I'll cover those on our next slide. Now, here are the 5 essentials for credit wellness as you see on your screen in front of you. The first one is know your starting point. The 3 credit bureaus are companies that maintain credit reports and provide the information to creditors, insurers, and others as permitted under law for the purpose of evaluating someone's financial responsibility. You're entitled to a free credit report from all 3 bureaus every year. When you get a report, look for unfamiliar transactions or lenders that you don't remember doing business with. If you find something incorrect or suspicious on a report, you should report it immediately. Second, you want to check your credit score regularly. Checking your score regularly is a great way to monitor changes in your credit worthiness. And watch out for unexpected impacts caused by reporting errors or fraudulent transactions, which may be a tip-off that identity has been compromised. Third, build credit by using it responsibly. If your credit score isn't where you want it to be, start small and secure. Secure credit cards or loans are accounts where you're getting credit, but it's tied to a cash deposit the lender can easily collect if you don't make your payments. This can be a great way to start building your history. If you pay your secured card on time, eventually you'll be able to qualify for unsecured credit. Now, another option might be having a co-borrower with a person who has established credit history. It's common for young adults to co-borrow with their parents who have a longer, more established credit history already. Fourth, you want to make sure you stay on top of your payments. When it comes to making payments on time, you want to reduce friction and make it easy as possible. One way to do that is to schedule automatic payments for all of your credit accounts. If you're worried about overdrafting your account, consider scheduling them for payday. Remember, you don't have to wait until a due date to pay your bills, just as long as the money gets there on or before the due date. This is also a neat psychological trick. If the money leaves your account the same day you get paid, you don't really notice or miss it. And then fifth, you want to make sure you chip away at your debt. A debt repayment plan is a detailed schedule of how much and when you're going to pay down your debt. You can find calculators and resources for this online, or you can work with a financial advisor or coach to make your plan. Knowing when and how much to pay back is really helpful. Try to pay high interest rate credit cards first. This will save you money in the long run. And when possible, make more than the minimum payment each month. Now, on the next slide, Barry, we'll cover how creating habits relates to working towards your goal.
Definitely. Thanks, Jason. And hopefully you can see that whether you're working toward a goal of credit wellness or sticking to a budget, or maybe it's even a non-financial goal that you have, your habits are definitely going to be important. And each of us has a lot of positive habits that we can dial into to help achieve our goals, along with the ability to be cutting out negative habits that might derail us from our goals along the way. And goals are something that we set consciously, while habits are often something we do without thinking much about it. However, we're not destined to stay this way. We can create positive habits that will help us work towards and achieve our goals. We often become more aware of unconscious positive and negative habits when we notice how they do end up impacting our goals along the way. I know for me, as an example, a negative habit I sometimes find myself struggling with is not asking for help when I am feeling stuck in a certain situation. So, maybe it's being unsure on how to start a budget, or maybe it's I'm feeling stuck on how to begin to save for my future, or putting myself in the best financial position possible. I can think of many instances that I've been too prideful or embarrassed, or maybe simply just too shy to ask for assistance. But by remaining in the stuck position, it only delays what I'm wanting to move forward with from a goals perspective. And I often end up wasting a lot of time and energy feeling frustrated and defeated along the way. Now, on the other side of things, a positive habit that I feel that I've developed and has really contributed to helping me stay on track with my goals is, taking the time at the end of each day, whether it's my work day or maybe it's my personal schedule, or in most cases, likely both of those, and previewing the next day to see what I have coming up, and making sure that I can stay prepared for what is next in my life. So I know this might seem small or fairly obvious to a lot of you too, but for me, it helps me feel that I'm one step ahead of the game and that I can really hit the ground running the next day as far as what I need to accomplish. And with that being said, if you find yourself feeling stuck, or finding like you or feeling like you could use an accountability partner to help you with your goals and habits, US Bank, we do offer free one-on-one goals coaching that can help you along the way. John, do you want to go ahead and explain how the goals coaching program works that we offer?
Of course, Barry. Barry and I, we have the privilege of being, a couple of our goals coaches with US Bank. On our next slide, I'll have a little bit more details about our program and a way to kind of get yourself involved. Our coaching program, it starts with our partnership with UNLV. Over the past couple of years, we've now been able to be developed and a great partnership with them, both through the alumni as well as career services. And so if you are interested in having a session with one of the goals coaches, I encourage you to scan that QR code on your screen right now, or you can just go to that link, unlv.edu/career services/goals-coaching. There you can kind of sign up for a goals coaching session. And what the session really is the kind of things we've talked about throughout today. It starts with our goals discovery, talking about the goals that are important to you, mapping out that life that you see for yourself down the line. And then from there, being partnered with a coach long-term, being able to have a cadence where we work together and achieve those goals together and alongside of you, keeping each other and keeping you in check and allowing you to work your way closer to those goals one day at a time. Barry, I'm going to pass it back to you a little bit more of the resources that are available through a US Bank.
Yeah, thanks, John. And yeah, with that, make sure that you're taking some time to go ahead and visit usbank.com / the financial IQ site that we offer. So again, that's usbank.com / financial IQ. There's a lot of tools on that site that you can go through at your own pace and you'll really just take some time to explore that I think everybody would find extremely helpful, whether it's tools around budgeting or financial education or just financial literacy as a whole. That's a great resource to take advantage of. And again, you can really pace yourself through some of the different resources and materials that we offer on that site. So with that, I'll go ahead and send it over to Jason. Do you want to go ahead and wrap us up with our presentation today?
Thank you so much, Barry and John. And thank you all for taking time out of your busy days to go ahead and join us on this financial wellness journey today. Now, I'm sure many of you still have questions after watching this video. So if you would like to, please scan our QR codes on the screen to meet with one of our goals coaches or banker, or you're always feel free to stop by our branch we have on the UNLV campus or across any of our other locations. We'd be happy to help answer any questions you have. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.